Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. He's a man, goddamn is he.
Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Community America Credit Union. My name is still Joel Goldberg. Hope you are doing well. Excited for another episode of RTB here. Quick shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. I love working with them. They are making connections that matter. chiefofstaffkc.com. Hope you'll check them out. The job industry is certainly an interesting one right now. We know that the world of advertising is one that has always been interesting, always changing, and always oftentimes up with the times. And here on Rounding the Bases, there's one topic that continues to be a cornerstone of the stories that we tell, and that is culture. So important to me and everything that I speak about. See that with the Royals, and the best organizations have great culture. Whether building, defining, or changing it, it's as integral to what we do here each week as it is to the business leaders who join me to discuss it. Our guest is acutely aware that culture is one of those things that, while practiced at every level of an organization, actually starts at the top. With that, he's made a point of building his company around one very simple concept, which is to add good. Add it to ideas, add it to your brand, or as tends to be the case for brand agency extraordinaire Jeff King, the CEO of Barkley, add it to the lives of those around you. From his acclaimed diversity initiatives to his tireless service of area youths, Jeff adds a healthy serving of good wherever he goes, balancing purpose with profits and leading by example. In doing so, he imparts real change, not just on the creative genius that keeps Barkley clients happy, but in his community, the industry, and arguably around the world. This is a discussion I've wanted to have for a long time because it's great to talk to a CEO that truly values culture. I'm joined right now by the Barkley CEO, Jeff King. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great, Joel. Thanks for having me. Those were very kind words.
Well, my pleasure, and all true. I also have a great researcher, writer, and assistant. Although you and I have talked about a lot of this, having met and been introduced, I think through Andre Davis.
That's right.
And we have a lot of mutual connections. Andre is one of the great connectors here in Kansas City. But before we talk about what's going on at Barkley, and you and I are recording this a bit before it'll air in February, how have you as a company with such great culture survived the last year and a half, 2 years of complete madness like you've never seen before?
Well, we've done exactly what a lot of companies have done, which is we've gone home and we've stayed safe and prioritized the safety of our folks in our community and done everything we can to collaborate virtually like you and I are right now. Our business is, it is a highly collaborative business. Ideas don't happen in a vacuum. They happen with people in a room building and debating and bringing diverse perspectives. So, we replicate that as best we can. But recently, we've tried to get into the office more, but the Omicron has kind of pushed us back a little bit. So we continue to adjust, just like everybody.
Yeah, and that's it. I don't know if it's, and maybe this just differs by company. It's been so fascinating to me to see the different takes on this. You have, I think sometimes a lot of older school executives saying, wait a minute, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. We need to get back to that. You got the younger generation that has a different feel. Of course, we're talking right now about the great resignation and people moving from more expensive places like the coasts to a Kansas City or wherever it might be to work from home. How have you seen all that playing out?
Well, I will tell you, so even before the pandemic, we have people spread out. So we have our main offices here in Kansas City, but we have an office in New York, one in Pittsburgh, and one in Denver. So one of the things that the pandemic has actually done is it's greatly enhanced our ability to collaborate across offices, which is something we were frankly struggling with prior to. And it was as simple as adopting the technology, changing our meeting behaviors, doing things that we should have been doing a long time ago. So in some ways, that's actually helped us. I think where it's been challenging is client meetings and presentations and things like that. But I think for the most part, what we intend to do is come out of this stronger than we went in, based on what we've learned for sure.
Which is, I think the best companies do. They see opportunity, they learn from it, they come out on the other side versus those that are waiting for it to pass because the world changes. And I think that, you know, I always laugh when you hear someone say, "Oh, in our case, Kansas City is resistant to change. Kansas City's everybody's slow to change in general." I mean, wherever you go, it's like people when they complain, the weather changes quicker here than everywhere else. Well, changes quick everywhere else too. I mean, you feel like it's you. But I'm curious in terms of the advertising agency where you have to stay relevant, right? You have to stay up with the times. The advertising world today doesn't look like what it did probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it certainly doesn't look like it did in the quote unquote Mad Men era or on and on and on. Is change easier in the advertising world? Are you guys better positioned to do that, or is it hard like it is for everyone else?
I mean, it's hard like it is for everybody else, but I think we are paid to stay on top of culture. Our clients come to us to help them stay on trend, help them stay up with culture. So, we have people who do nothing but research and study human behavior and changing times and technology. So that does give us some advantage is we may see things coming sooner than other types of industries or organizations. Um, Going back to culture, culture is so critical at times like this because it's the foundation that you lay over a decade that then defines what's going to happen when something like a pandemic hits. So I think that's one of the reasons to your intro and talking about the importance of culture and organization. The reason you have to invest in it every single day is because you never know what's around the corner. And so the stronger your foundation is, the better off you'll be no matter what happens.
That's the $1 million, $64,000, whatever you want to call it, answer right there. That's it in a nutshell to me. I mean, the companies that had good culture, and it's not the only thing, right? But the companies that had good culture when this started are probably less likely to panic. They are probably more likely to be able to bond together and get through this versus the ones that are first trying to figure it out. It's foundation to me. This is who you are. It's the way you go about things, good, bad, no matter what it is. And I've seen that with the Royals too, and I know you're a big Royals fan, but it's amazing to me, even as they went up to the top and won and then came back down, the culture never went away. They're on their way back right now, not just because of talent, because of culture. You look at the way they were one of the only organizations to pay their minor leaguers when there wasn't, when the pandemic was going on. You look right now, they're building a facility to house minor leaguers, which they had never done before. And so I'm wondering if there's some similarities there in the sense of who Barkley is and how important that has always been to you guys.
Well, it's interesting. My partner and I are both big Royals fans, and I don't know Dayton Moore personally. I've never met him, but I pay a lot of attention to him and his leadership style. And we were watching very closely to what they did, and definitely borrowing from that. I think early in the pandemic, the biggest thing for us was to make people feel secure and protected in their jobs. And so that was our number one focus, was to make sure that we were incredibly transparent with where we were as a business. We were going through the PPP process like a lot, making sure that people understood the implications of that on their jobs. And that was really a big part of it, is how do we make people feel safe and secure, which is similar to what Dayton did with the organization. And I thought that was really important.
Because in the end, it's always about taking care of people. I mean, it sounds so basic until you look and see how often that is missed in certain organizations, fields, whatever it might be, whether it's sports, business, or whoever. I mean, the late David Glass, who passed away a little over 2 years ago, always said to me, and I use this clip sometimes in speeches, it always comes down to people. And yes, talent is incredibly important, but if you can't take care of your people, what does talent matter, right?
It's true in every industry, I believe, true in every organization, but no more than ours, because we don't have a tangible product other than what comes out of people's brains. And so, how we recruit, the type of talent. To me, I always use the sports analogy, but in our industry, the team with the best talent wins almost every time. The team with the best talent in the right culture wins. And so, yeah, I mean, it's critical. Attracting and retaining key talent is everything in our business.
So I want to go to your background here and over a quarter century with Barkley, which is amazing. I don't know if anybody will ever do that again, the way everybody's changing jobs, and maybe some will, right? It's almost like the baseball world or any sport for that matter. There aren't a lot of Derek Jeters or Alex Gordons or Cal Ripkins and yes, we could say that I've now called you Cal Ripken or Derek Jeter, but George Brett. But you don't stay with one place in your career that long unless it's a great fit, obviously, unless you're good at what you do, you treat people right, all the things that we've talked about. But that is becoming more uncommon now to be able to be in one spot. Shoot, I've been Royals baseball for 14 years. That's a miracle on my end too. But even changing professions, people do that. So you've been there 26 years. The good old, how did it start and where are we at now? How did it start for you as a young kid coming out of Mizzou, and how did Barkley happen?
Yeah, basically that just means I'm old, Joel. But
Yeah, me too.
So I was a journalism school student at Mizzou. And I applied for a scholarship in Kansas City through the Ad Club of Kansas City. And part of the winning that scholarship, I was assigned a mentor who connected me to Barkley. And that's where it all started. So I got connected with some folks at Barkley. I did a summer internship between my junior and senior year in college, and then started as an entry-level employee right out of school. I did leave for a little while. So I worked at Barkley for about 5 years, ventured out, did a couple other things, came back a few years later. I think that perspective and experience was terrific. But I've been back since 2003.
Yeah, it's a long run, and of course, over that time, you eventually become the CEO of such a well-known and well-respected company around the country and the globe, for that matter, too. What was that transition like? And obviously a different role at this point, but one in a company that you're so familiar with.
So I'm the fourth CEO in the history of the company. The company's been around since 1964. And I took the CEO role in 2009 and transitioned from a great leader who had given me a lot of opportunity. His name was Brian Brooker. And he was also our chief creative officer, which is somewhat unusual for the creative lead of an agency to also be the CEO. He did a great job and set a great path. And then I succeeded him and came in at a time where the business was really in a bit of a rough shape. We had one client at the time that was highly leveraged in our business, one client that represented about 50% of our total company revenue. And we knew that client was not going to be around for much longer. So that was really the beginning of creating a foundation for the organization's future when we knew we were going to be losing half of our revenue very quickly.
I wanted to go back to one thing too, because I saw that in our research and questionnaires that you had talked about that internship in 1991 almost not happening. And I think that there's a great lesson there. I think most of them have had these type of experiences at some point. If older guys like you and me have made it, by the way, I look older than you because I've got the white hair. I know your response is going to be that
at least you have hair.
At least I have hair. This is always a great debate that goes on. But okay, fine. We're a little bit older. We've been around, but that means that we've been rejected. We've handled rejection. We have been told no and still figured out how to get it done. This could have derailed for you in terms of your Barkley future very easily if in 1991 as a kid, you don't have a little bit of resiliency. Tell me about that.
Well, I had my mentor through the Ad Club scholarship connect me with some folks at Barkley, and it was late in the season, so they had already hired all their interns. So when I called and asked for a meeting, they said, "Well, we've already hired our interns, so maybe next time." So I pushed for the meeting anyway, just to get practice interviewing, which they granted. We got in, had the discussion, And I started asking them about the number of interns they had for the summer and why they chose that number and why couldn't there be one more. And eventually they acquiesced and added a position for the summer, which I was able to do.
I mean, to me, when I hear that story, I hear a couple things. One, I hear about advocating for yourself, which is a hard thing to do at that age too. I mean, it tells me that you were hungry and that you weren't just satisfied with that answer of no. You can't be too pushy because otherwise you're gonna turn people off and they're just gonna tune you out and move on. But I think the other end to that too is just by asking to talk to them, just by asking for that time, you gave yourself a chance to showcase yourself a little bit, to be able to build a relationship. I mean, this is true in pretty much every profession, certainly the advertising world. Getting back to people, it's all about relationships. I mean, if you don't ask for that, who knows where things go.
Well, I know you're a great connector, Joel, and I think that's something that I've definitely learned over the years is you should never turn down a conversation with somebody. Anytime somebody is willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, you're going to get something out of it. And I think that that's just really important to be open.
Couldn't agree with it more. I want to move on to my baseball themed questions. And in this long, illustrious career of yours, what would be the biggest home run that you have hit?
Well, I think the best answer to that is multifaceted. But back in 2009, when I became CEO and we were about to lose that one client that was such a big part of our revenue, we had an opportunity at that point to really reframe what our company was about for the future. And what we did was at the time, much was starting to be talked about with millennials as a demographic group. But as we started looking around for information on millennials and how they would impact our clients' brands, there was really nothing out there yet about millennials and their attitudes towards brands, their media consumption, their purchase behaviors, things like that. So we decided as we were downsizing the company to invest money in proprietary research. And we did at the time in partnership with Boston Consulting Group, the largest study conducted on millennials and their attitudes towards brands. And it became a huge hit with marketers around the country and around the world. And so Boston Consulting took the research and used it for their purposes. We took it and started to create a content strategy, and that started to open many doors that weren't open to us before in terms of brands who wanted to talk to us. We ultimately took that content and wrote a book that was published, the first of its kind, called Marketing to Millennials. And based on the success of that over time, we continued to study millennials into adulthood. We then transitioned to Gen Z. And then over the past 5 years, we've really shifted away from specific demographic segments into studying modern consumer behavior across all demographics. And it's led to 7 books, thousands of published reports, hundreds of keynote speaking engagements around the world. And it's really redefined Barkley, this company based in Kansas City, as the foremost expert in our industry on how to connect brands with modern consumers. And I would say that was the biggest thing that was most transformational in our company.
And that never stops, right? I mean, it's again back to that open-mindedness, being aware of what's going on. I just, I'll sidebar on this one a little bit, but I am always amazed, and I'm always catching myself for people that say, well, the kids don't know this, or oh, these kids nowadays don't want to work and all of that. And say, well, we were those kids at one point too. And if you're wanting to do things the way we did them, in my case, in your case, in the 90s, where are we going to be? I mean, it just seems to me like you guys have really figured out how to be inclusive in many ways, of course, but in terms of that younger perspective.
Yeah, there's always been a saying in our business that advertising is a young person's business. And as I've gotten older, I've pushed against that. I believe that our business is a curious person's business, which sometimes can equate to younger. But I think continuing to have a modern mindset, back to your point about staying on top of culture, understanding trends. But to work in our industry, you really have to be relentlessly curious. And I think that's what's led to people over time saying it's a young person's business.
because sometimes when we're older, well, we should be more curious. We're more seasoned and we've been through it and we understand the value in curiosity. But I think sometimes we can get complacent in general too. How about a swing and a miss? And what did you learn from it?
The biggest swing and misses in my career have all been around hiring, because back to the point of it being a people business. And I can think of two, maybe three very specific instances where I made what I now call lazy hires. And I think when a leader makes a lazy hire, they typically, or at least in my case, hired for the resume or the experience. It seemed like an easy fit. Like they've done this job, they've done it for a similar organization, and maybe overlooked some of the things I should have been paying more attention to, like the raw talent, the value base, the ethical makeup of the individual. And so each of those times that I made what I now look at as a lazy hire, and you put somebody in a leadership role that starts to chip away at the culture you've worked so hard to build, it can set you back. And I can think of a couple instances where I did that, and definitely learned from that. I think to the sports analogy, you got to hire for athletes. You need to hire for the things that you can't teach. In baseball, you can't teach speed, right? You're either fast or you're not. I can teach you to field. I can teach you to some degree to hit, but I can't teach you to be fast. It's the same in our business. Hire people with great talent, great ethics, great values. You can teach them the business.
And you've got good people, but very talented people at the same time too. I popped it up on the screen for those that are watching us on YouTube, but let everybody know that you can check out some of this creativity, which is amazing, at barkleys.com. Just the writing on the website is really good. It's very catchy. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I mean, you go through it as a bunch of rule breakers and orthodoxy smashers. We're always in beta. I don't know who wrote that one, but that one blows my mind, because it just, creativity to me is always so much fun.
That was probably our chief creative officer, Katie Hornaday. She is one of my biggest home runs in terms of a hire.
All right. Well, I'm glad you got to mention her. I don't think I know Katie, but a shout out to her, because among a lot of the copy that I was reading on the website, that was one that I said, I don't know that I've ever seen that sentence before, and it's really cool. So anyway, just my 2 cents on that one. How about small ball? This is what matters to me more than anything, so that I wrote my book on it. It's the little things that add up to the big results. What is small ball to you?
I mean, staying on theme, it's really assembling the team and creating depth at all levels. So obviously it starts with the leadership team that I'm responsible for putting in place, and then making sure that we've got the right tools and the right conditions in place for people to thrive. It's our product. I mean, everything that we do for our clients, no matter how small, whether it's an individual Instagram post for a brand or a Super Bowl commercial, we have to put the same time and attention and quality. And then I think the other is that's becoming so much more important in our industry, and it gets to diversity, is making sure that we are bringing diverse points of view and diverse perspective to our clients. We're in an industry that has historically been very monotone, meaning very white. And we're making huge efforts to diversify our agency and to make an impact on the industry overall, in terms of bringing diversity of all forms into our thinking. We're in the business of unique ideas and originality doesn't come from monolithic thinking. So bringing people in with different life experiences to collaborate on problems for clients is more important than ever. And when you look at the changing demographics of our country, if we don't, as an industry, keep up with that change, we're going to be extinct.
It's so powerful. And I know that you guys hired everybody's buddy, Adam Miller, in the last couple of years as director of diversity and inclusion, who, by the way, have you met a guy with more energy or no?
I haven't. He takes so much energy to be around. He is an energy giver, if there ever was one. He's amazing. He's had a big impact on our organization already.
Yeah. And I knew the moment. I didn't know you at the time that you hired him. I knew Adam. He has been on this podcast, and we're in some groups together. And I knew that was a home run as well, because that's a guy that you want in that space, in any space for that matter. That's a different discussion about energy givers. But let me move on to my 4 final questions as we round the bases, and let's go a little bit. Let's dig a little bit deeper here. I mean, it's as this is airing for the first time, it's Black History Month. I told you beforehand that, and you and I have talked about this over coffee too. I think that Andre Davis brought us together because we had similar views and held the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion at the highest of levels. And I think that there's value in 2 guys that look like you and I, that are not people of color, in being advocates, in being allies, and helping push this. Certainly in your role as the CEO of such a highly respected and highly regarded advertising agency, you have that platform. I have that platform in terms of media. And I just think it's an interesting discussion because you're a guy that did not grow up in an area that would have diversity. I don't know that that's a knock on it. That's where you grew up.
It's just reality.
So, yeah, it's reality. I mean, if you grow up in a small town, there's a good chance it's not going to be all that diverse. Tell me about that background and sort of how, in a nutshell, you got to where you are to this place today. Because I always feel, Jeff, like the diversity, equity, inclusion discussion is one where at some point, certainly for someone that's white, the cycle breaks, if there was one, where suddenly the next generation or 2 generations or 3 generations later start thinking differently than someone in their past did. It's not always that way, but I was lucky. I was raised by parents that were very inclusive, but I think I'm even in a better place than they were because I'm a couple steps removed from the way they were raised, and on and on. How is it for you?
I mean, I grew up in a small town in rural Missouri, and there was zero diversity and really zero awareness or teaching about the importance of diversity in my upbringing. I was raised by 2 parents who were incredibly loving and very accepting and loving of others, and so I think that was at least a foundation. But it wasn't until probably the last 5 to 10 years of my career that I've become keenly aware of my own ignorance, my own shortcomings in this area. And back to the point of this being a very curious person's business, definitely have strived to educate myself and our leadership team, and surround myself with people like Andre and Adam, and learning from them and their experiences and points of view. So there's 2 aspects of it to me. One is a moral or ethical issue of trying to change the course of what our industry has been and represented in the past, because it's a good thing to do. But the other is super pragmatic. It is, we are hired by brands to bring relevance to their brands. And nothing is less relevant today than the monolithic white thinking that is not enlightened. And so clients come to us, what they deserve and what we need to deliver to them is a very holistic, very diverse perspective on how to connect with humans.
And it's so spot on. And this is more your expertise than mine, but it's nice to look up at the TV right now and see more representation. And I don't know if I guess I fault myself for never having noticed it before. In the past, it wasn't, why are there so many white people here? But now I'm looking up and saying, boy, this looks more realistic to society.
Well, it goes so much deeper too in our industry. So you mentioned one of the obvious and very important aspects, which is how we cast television commercials and how we cast in all of our creative elements is one piece of it. But what people often don't think about is it starts with developing the human insights to begin with before we get to the work and the briefing process. So how is the research conducted? What's the screener? Who are the types of people we're researching? What are the types of questions we're asking that informs the work that we do? Then think about the development of the ideas themselves. Who's actually sitting down and writing the copy and thinking of the scenarios that we're going to put people in, making sure that we're not stereotyping certain individuals in certain ways because of our past experiences. And then thinking about production, when you historically go to like television production in our industry, the staff is white, the camera people, the lighting people, the stylists.
Hmm.
the makeup artists. So what we're trying to do is holistically change the industry from at every level to make sure that it's not just at the end where we say, okay, well, let's cast differently, but let's rethink the concept from the very beginning, from the research and the insights to the briefing to the development of the work all the way through to make sure that it's well-rounded.
It's good stuff. All right, second question. We'll stay a little bit along the same topic. I mean, while there's been an enlightenment for you in recent years, you've been very involved, and I know will continue to be so as well with organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters, in terms of boards that you're on, and the Brand Lab. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think that really important organization, Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is how I know Andre. He and I serve on the board together, and he made the introduction. I think is really a core root organization in terms of getting kids paired with mentors that can help them achieve their biggest possible potential. So I love the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, been involved with for over 20 years. The Brand Lab is relatively new. So the Brand Lab is something that we helped bring to Kansas City as an organization to help increase the diversity of the pipeline of talent coming into the advertising industry. So that's often been an easy excuse for people in my industry to say, well, we'd be happy to hire more diverse talent. It's just not available to us. We don't get the resumes. And so what the Brand Lab does is it actually starts at the high school level. It's an organization whose mission is to create awareness and access to the advertising industry. So we work with high schools in Kansas City area, and there's the Brand Lab also exists in the Twin Cities, in Minnesota, and in Milwaukee. And so we partner with high schools in those communities to teach advertising curriculum, to make kids aware of careers in advertising that they may not understand. Because if you're a young person of color, based on what our industry looks like today and has historically, you don't have an adult friend or an uncle or a parent who work in advertising. So you got to find a different path there. So the Brand Lab opens their eyes, makes them aware of what skill sets translate to our industry. And then we have a whole mentorship program where we bring high school kids into ad agencies and corporate marketing departments to start to teach them the skills they'll need to succeed in the business.
Very cool. So that is the Brand Lab, and what an awesome concept. Third question, I'll go lighthearted here. I know that you're an active guy, and I think you're a runner and cycler and all of that. I suppose that once you get into your early 50s, I'm knocking on the door, by the way, so I'm right behind you, that you don't do a whole lot of pole vaulting anymore. Maybe you are. I'm not really sure. It doesn't seem like a 50-something-year-old thing. There's probably some of them out there, but you were a pole vaulter at one point. I don't know that I've asked a pole vaulting question on this podcast yet. So here we go.
You did your research, Joel. Wow. Yeah. So the last time I pole vaulted was at the state track meet in 1998 when I was a senior in high school. And that was
88, not 98, right?
1988. Did I say 98?
You said 98. You just made yourself younger.
I just made myself 10 years younger. 1988, I was at the state track meet in Jefferson City, and I was doing my last jump attempt to get a medal at the state track meet, and I misplanted my pole. And from about 12 and a half feet, I veered off to the side and missed the mat and fell flat on the asphalt. Concussed myself terribly. Was knocked unconscious, but didn't break any bones. I was fine. About 2 years later, I was taking a class at Mizzou that was taught by the Mizzou track coach. And he was telling a story about being at a track meet a couple years ago and seeing this guy miss the mat pole vaulting. And I had to go up to him after class and tell him that was me. So that was my last attempt. I'll never do it again.
Did he believe you when you told him that was you?
Yeah, he did.
What a coincidence that ended up being the case. All right, final question. We'll get a little bit more serious here, the walk-off, but we've talked so much about culture. We've talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, and we've talked about change in the advertising world. And I'm always fascinated by this because we see how quickly change can sometimes be forced upon us with the pandemic. But the advertising industry, unlike many others, is not going away. I mean, I really worry. You were a J school journalism major. I was too. My field of television. I mean, kids aren't coming out of college at this point wanting to be on the news like I wanted to. Some are, but for the most part, they're exploring other avenues through social media and things like TikTok, which I don't belong on, and all the way that world is changing, and they don't necessarily want to come out of school and be on Sports Center or who knows. I don't know what baseball broadcasting is going to look like in the future. I'm worried about the newspaper industry and the television industry. They'll find something. I just don't know what it's going to be. But again, you guys continue to evolve. What does advertising in the future look like?
I mean, advertising in the future, it's all those things that you just mentioned, the TikToks of the world. It's continually staying up with technology. It's brands. To me, advertising in the future is thinking about a brand in a very holistic way and the way that brand behaves in the world, simply put. And so the way a brand behaves in the world can happen through paid advertising. It can happen through organic communications, but it also needs to happen in terms of the brand's practices behind the scenes, their purpose and sustainability practices, which is a big area of focus and a big practice area that we're growing right now. It has to do with their own diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging practices, which we now consult with clients on. So the way we look at the future of our business is, how do we look at a brand from the inside out, and how does that brand show up in the world? It's really all of those things, not just the commercials.
So that aspect of it doesn't change. I mean, there's change, but that theory, that philosophy doesn't change.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating stuff. By the way, I'm not an anti-TikTok guy. I just don't think I belong on it. Or if at some point someone sees me on a TikTok, it's not going to be doing a dance. It's going to be, I don't really even know. But
well, the secret is, whenever I get a question from a client about TikTok, I go home and ask my 15-year-old, and
yes,
he educates me.
Yes, because they live on there.
That's right.
And there's some things that we're just not meant to do. But again, curiosity, right? And so you
That's
learn
right.
that way. Jeff, this is a great discussion. If people want to learn more, they can go to barkleyus.com. Really appreciate it. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for the visit.
I appreciate the work you're doing in the community, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jeff. Likewise.